I spend a lot of time in groups about this size with people with interests like this. At almost every place I go, they say we're the front lines. We're ground zero for experimentation. I was just in New Orleans a month ago. I think it was in a month ago, where they just closed the last traditional public school, and it is an entire charter school now. When I'm out in LA, you know, they're all like, yes, well, the big money people, the big philanthropists, you know, the broad foundation, they're rooted here, and they're buying the school board, and they're doing, like, they still have a school board there that's elected. However, the amount of money that folks are putting into certain candidates means that they get to say it's democracy, but it's really, it's not. Because these people have been purchased. So with numbers like $5 million, you know, to one person's campaign, $7 million to another. So the 7 school board members, 5 have been funded in the millions of dollars by the forces of evil. So they got a whole other thing going on there. If you're in DC, that's ground zero for teachers. So the thing in Baltimore, there's a whole other story about that. And the things that are similar are people in one district know what's happening to them, but rarely have an understanding of how it really is being reproduced in communities of color all over the country, and hard. And so there's one thing I'm always saying is, as long as we think this is our narrative, like this is our story of how ed reform is being rolled out, how teachers are being let go, children are being undereducated, and that we have a special story, it keeps pushing back separate in a way. Because really, I don't remember the last part. You go to Cleveland, LeBron's doing some interesting things in Cleveland, but you go to Cleveland, and other than LeBron, it's the same story everywhere. So yes, the portfolio model is y'all's big. Like, that is the thing that is, you know, the reform folks are like, but we got the portfolio, right? The all charter districts are, DC is basically all charter now, as is basically, I think it's 70%.
So the person that ran that program came out of Denver.
Yeah.
Right? Same for Oakland. They came out of Denver. So when I say it's the Death Star, I'm saying
they train them here and send them
to DC, send them to Oakland, send them to
yeah,
LA.
didn't I feel like New York's superintendent might have put in some time in Denver. Or maybe that was Texas. But that's because that's a whole other thing. Like Texas, that's a whole other thing. Atlanta, right? So part of the thing about figuring out how to fix it has got to be about collaboration, you know, with other people, because I spend so much time talking to people. I know it's every city there are people, Black people, Latino people, white people, who are like, we need to push back. And the first thing is not about electing people, but it's figuring out how to educate our kids. Like, that's the first, like, while we do all the rest of it, you got to figure out models and places and spaces that are going to fix what's broken. And what I think is it's broken because it's lucrative. So that's my whole thing. So my whole 2 cents about it is, since Reconstruction, since post-Reconstruction, when public education was first, became a thing, there's always been these forces of philanthropists and elected officials who tell Black children in particular, and Black communities in particular, now this is since the 1870s, your education does not need to look like the education of white kids. If it's, you more need vocational education, so in the 1870s, like at the beginning of the educational system in the South, the whole thing was, all you need is vocational education. We won't fund it if it's not vocational. I'm not mad at vocational education. I'm just saying the lack of options beyond that the only thing we will pay for you to have a school is if you're gonna be a nurse, learn how to make bricks, learn domestic science, be a, like, it's something vocational, and never thinking beyond that. And that's the thread that I discovered in this book that I didn't know. Like, I didn't go into it knowing that, but there's no periods of time that I've been able to find when the predominant educational vision was about educating poor white kids too, I have to say, poor kids and kids of color in the same ways that you do wealthy kids. They will consistently say, that's old. So today, you'll have people, what's her name, Lorena Jobs? So she's got this whole thing that she started, a lot of people have it now, but she really started that the educational system we have today is a 19th century version of education that was meant to, when we had farms, when you were trying to have farmers in industrial and manufacturing, and so we need something new today. And on its face, that kind of sounds like you're kind of like, well, yes, we have had this for a long time, and perhaps we do need something new, and let's think about that. But consistently, if you look at how those same people educate their own kids, they don't think. Lorena Jobs ain't send her child to a school to learn something new. She sent her kid to a school where they're teaching Latin and Greek. I swear to you, I have looked at this. How old school is that? Like, that's a whole other old school. Where they are teaching still the classics, where they're going back to the great, that's the basis that all of these billionaires that are telling black communities how their kids should be, how our kids should be educated, they don't educate. Not one of them educates their children in the same way. And so that's the first thing to look at, right? When people come to you and say, this is what you need. This is best for you. This is going to fix the ways that you're broken. If it's not what they want for their own, that's the basis for the pushback to me. Like, I'll do it as soon as you do it. You want to cyber educate your kids? Like, you want your kids to do kindergarten in front of a computer? When you start doing that, then okay, perhaps, perhaps I will think that my kid needs to be educated from kindergarten in front of a computer. But to the extent that wealthy people and people in Silicon Valley are steady saying we need less technology in our kids' lives, they are steady saying we want less screen time. Screen time is harmful. We need them to get basics in different kinds of ways. They will turn around and tell an entire district what you need to do with preschooler 3 and 4-year-olds is sit them in front of a computer, let the computer, it helps them feel empowered. It helps them have ownership. It moves at their own pace. They're not bullied. They don't have issues in the schoolyard. Let them sit in front of the computer, right? Not one Silicon Valley maverick is educating their child like that. So why is it okay for ours? So one of the first things that I say is that y'all are organized with each other, but to the extent that you can start to make linkages with other communities, that's when you get a movement. And this is going to take a movement to push back, because these folks have been the reform movement. Since the 1980s, they have been on a forward march to take government schools, right? To take the money, to educate black kids and poor kids into a social order. Although that Horace Mann Bond in the 30s and 40s was talking about how there's a social order that we want to educate black kids into. But it's going to take some real organization and some pushback. And the grounds of it and the basis of it, to me, is not equality is integration, which that's a whole other thing we can talk about. But it's, we want the same education you got. The education you value, the class sizes you value, the educational form, the quality of the teachers that you value. You try to have I'm going to teach your child for 2 years, just got out of college, go to a highly resourced school district, and that we are going to be the primary source of teaching for you. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. But our kids, it's like you should be happy to get them. They're from good colleges. Well, they do. I mean, they are. Like, you should be happy. You should be grateful. One of the things I just discovered that I've been talking to a lot of NAACP chapters, and in Mississippi and in California, throughout the South, and with some are hooking up with the Dream Defenders, the younger people who are, their whole thing is to redefine neighborhood schools, to get out from under this narrative of integration, and really say, let's figure out, give us the school and then give us the resources to do what we need to do to teach these kids. And it's the national office is losing their mind because they're still adjudicating 600 cases around the country that come out of the 1960s, right? There's still 600. But at the local level, around that issue, that we can't do it if our kids are all spread out, 15 over here, but trying to make some kind of balance, right? So around that issue, there's all kinds of NAACP chapters around the country that I can certainly tell you about that are saying this. I don't know what that looks like here. Like I don't know what what that is for here. Then there's some other places that are really about almost like Saturday school, independent schools, where you're filling in the gaps, so you can't really figure out how you're going to take back, do a whole neighborhood school thing, and you're not sure you trust people to give you the resources that you need, and you don't know where you're going to get the teacher, right? Like, so if you can't do that, there are folks who are coming up with reading curriculum where they're sharing things that work and actually having some successes. So that kind of, how do we fill in, I don't know what to call it, like it's like after school and Saturday, and similar to what Asian parents do. And some Jewish parents, would do. That's actually doing some good. You have to have kids, and it's all kind of grassroots, right? Like it's all people making commitments and then figuring out the funding and trying to systematize it so that you're not just experimenting on these kids. It's like trying to so you don't just kind of go, hey, I got an idea, let me do this to you. But they're all over the country. There are people doing that because they're sort of like, well, what do we do? I find though a lot of times, because the last group I would say that's really organized are young people, like students are doing these student unions all over the country. They're mostly pushing back around discipline in schools. Like they're mostly organizing themselves. But I didn't know till I was doing research that they're winning. Like I didn't know they were winning. Like, I didn't know that they were overturning, laws. They were like pushing back. They got the governor's ear over here. They're writing legislation over there. Like the young, like high school kids are tying fire to these folks. But you have to go looking for it to know. That it's happening. And so they push back as well against some of these faces who would say it's not, your experience is not what we want to talk about. I want to talk about my experience. I came from a hard luck period, I pulled myself up and let's all bootstrap. So that's the dynamic I see very often. It's younger people, like high school younger people, who are pushing back. And that's another thing to these student unions that are started in Philadelphia but are going around the country.
What are they?
The student unions? Well, so they started in Philadelphia. Philadelphia was ground zero for privatized education. It was really the first time there's this group called the Edison Schools, which was really just a guy who came out of advertising. Literally, he just came out of advertising, didn't know black people, didn't know anything about education, never taught anybody, never been around any black kids, didn't know anything about struggling schools because he went to the Harvard, Yale, went to prep schools. And he said, but I think I can do better in Philadelphia. I can do better than the school system. And there's a black mayor who was like, sure, because you often have, people who go, it's broke. And the well-educated white man said he can do better. And he said he can do it more cheaply. So let's give him a try. And so they tried to, this is the history of where the student unions go. So they tried to turn over the 40 lowest performing schools to random white man, which was a part of the narrative they were pushing back against. That's the reason that I'm bringing up his race, is because that was a part of, they were like, but he keep telling you he don't know anything about, anything about what's happening here. And us, and the politicians and the grown-ups and everybody's trying to accommodate this. And it's the kids that started going, but no, what we're seeing happening in our schools is not right. But no, what they're telling us, we can't let that stand. And the kids started kicking up so much dust that then adults started to pay attention and be like, wait, if they this unruly. And what the kids were saying now always, they were like, it's not even us, because by the time this gets enacted, many of us will be out of high school, but it's my brother, it's my sister, it's the people coming behind. We're looking at what you're putting in place to educate them. They had a strike of 100,000 kids left school and ringed the city hall in Philadelphia. And that's when the press started going, what now? What? Like, what is happening now? And they were saying, we need a voice, right? We need to have some kind of voice in what's happening, because clearly y'all have lost your mind, because this man doesn't know what he's doing. And it was true, the company ended up going bankrupt and didn't educate anybody, but got a whole bunch of money. But he was on the stock exchange. He was the first educational entity that went public. Wall Street paid attention to that, and all this stuff you see coming after, TFA, DFR, comes out of that. That took place in Philadelphia. I think it was telling her, I've been doing this project right now on the way that teachers in the 20s, 30s, and 40s wanted to do integration, which had to do with, and MLK was on board, and black teachers unions were all like, so the whole thing, and this I found like going through my grandfather's papers, which it never occurred to me as a teacher. It just sort of never occurred to me to start paying attention to what he was doing in the South, I'm ashamed to say, but I have started paying attention. And their whole thing was very clearly, integration should be send the teachers and administrators. Send black teachers and administrators to white schools, to send white teachers and administrators to black schools, to make a way for the students. They were adamantly opposed to putting that on kids, like adamantly. They were like, you have to do it. We can prepare the way, and we want to get paid equally, and we want to, like, there were all kinds of ways that kind of integration project was supposed to work. And we have never, the mass firings, like the firings of black teachers and closing of black schools pales in comparison to what happened leading up to Brown v. Board and after, pales. Black teachers and black schools were decimated, trying to get this. So that's one easy thing that I'm looking at now, and there is research from the 1930s on to support this. You need more black teachers.
May I have your attention, please?
You need more black teachers. And the numbers of qualified black teachers, right? This is not, so DC got this thing, they got this, we need more black teachers. So now they're taking high school students and letting them teach for a year, and that may or may not, I think you need more black teachers that have some actual experience in training, and that seemed like a heavy burden to put on high school students. And there's some extraordinary high school students who but anyway, that's their model, because we don't know where to find any black teachers. Where we go, there aren't hardly any. Black people don't want to be teachers. Black people, right? So there's an acknowledgement. There's very little to disprove that black teachers teaching black children does make a difference. It's something like, if you have one black teacher by the 4th grade, the percentage of kids who graduate college goes up based on that, based on one. And as I think about my own child, he only had one black teacher in the 4th grade. But when he got into college, she was the one he went to tell, right? Like, he went to find her, not any of the other way. And he was a good student, he wasn't, but he only had one. And so you think about, if we know that that's something that works, and that's not on anybody's table, that's not on anybody's policy, whatever, that seems to me a good place to start. Get if we do a school, or even maybe if you are doing after school, if you can't work out a whole school, but to make sure that there are black teachers. And as I think about it, I went to Spelman undergrad, and it's really true. I think to the extent that people who know me would say I'm saying, the one of the reasons is that I went to Spelman undergrad, and what they modeled, this seeing, first of all, it's a kind of, and I think black teachers did this and do this. It's almost like brainwashing because they tell you you are a black woman, you are excellent. Constant, like Spelman, they really do. You sit up in Sisters Chapel, you got to go every week, and they are telling you the fact that you are a black woman. And Morehouse is telling the black men the same thing, right? The fact that you are a black woman means you are excellent. Not that you aspire to, not that you, right, but it means it. And then you're seeing, you know, black people run the institution, and you know, people look like you do. I think that, I know that it makes a kind of difference, that and it's rare in this day and age. And so I would say, based on what I'm finding, like, since I'm one for don't experiment, since all the data says the more black teachers, qualified black teachers that kids who are struggling have, the better they do. And nobody can tell you exactly why or, you know, what exact whatever, but now where you get them, how you train them, how you make it sexy, that is a community by community conversation, right? Because communities are different. And where that pipeline would be, the level of interest, that really would be. But I would say a project that was looking at, make sure kids have. Well, because the sports are in those institutions' best interests, right? Black teachers are not necessarily, but the logic, yes, like yes, that could be where you go with, right? Like they don't. I mean, depending on the sport in the school, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar thing. So they want to recruit some black. They don't care if they can read. They don't care if they're, you know, gonna graduate. They really don't care like about the rest of it. I mean, I think that you can look and see. Like, I think that that I don't. Yeah, like so. But so those are the things that I think groups like yours, if you start thinking about, well, what is a project we could do? I mean, a community like yours, not groups like yours. What's a project we could bring together all of our resources, all of our interests, that's small enough for us to actually see? Like, it can't be like, we're going to take over everything. Like, that's not really realistic in the beginning. But what's something that you could say? These are the resources we have. We all know each other. We all know what people are bringing to the table. Here is the problem that we want to solve, the specific one like we want to solve. Bring your expertise together and start to do that, and that will grow. And like these other places that I'm telling you, they're good at this, or these groups are good at that, you know. I'm always saying, like, but if y'all combine this, I don't know what it would look like.